So here I have a reference sheet that's going to be basically what I'm going to be designing today. The theme is assassins, and I'm going to be showcasing you guys how I'm going to go about redesigning a character, a environmental prop, and last but not least, a prop that the character would be utilizing. So a couple of things before we go and start redesigning the character is I want to identify the type of character, the function, the overall form and design, right? So the character, we know that the character is going to have specific features like the hoodie here. The character is also going to have some sort of clothing that's be overlapping here, a belt strap across the chest, and obviously a lot of extra garment and fabric to kind of give it the more stealthy look. And last but not least, obviously the weapons, right? So we can go in further detail and start thinking about all the different elements that the character has, kind of these extra wrist guards and leather plates and stuff like that, right? But the most iconic thing about the character is definitely the hoodie, the hood, right? The hood, the weapon, and the fabric. My spelling is super sloppy today. I do apologize, guys. Alright, next is the environmental prop. So I went ahead and I kind of picked this this cannon, right? And I felt that it would be thematically appropriate for kind of this time period of the assassins. And if we look at the type of item that this is obviously a weapon, right? It's got the cannon and whatnot. Here's the projectile, and the overall functionality is used, for offensive reasons. And the overall form and design, we notice that there is a cylinder here for the actual cannon. We got two circular elements here. Circular or oval, right? And we have basically what is a wooden base, right? Now, all of this is very, very crucial to understand all of the shape components, because when we redesign, we want to be mindful of these elements so that when we translate our designs, we're able to understand what it is that we're manipulating and changing up. Alright, so the last but not least, we have the weapon, right? So this is a character prop, and obviously we know the type, it's a weapon. Function, overall, obviously it's for offensive and defensive use. And the form and design, if we look at it, there's a specific shape, right? We got the handle, which is more or less like a cylinder. We got kind of this cone here. We got this guard, and we got the blade, right? And the blade itself has a very unique tip. It's kind of anchored here at the tip here, and it's gonna basically come together at a very sharp point. So these are some shapes that I want to keep in mind as we're redesigning the character. So the next step, you guys might be wondering, well, how do we make it cool? How do we make it into our own design, right? Now, I don't want to just go and start just drawing random stuff, because that would be basically, one, I'm just kind of guessing my way, and I don't want to just like come up with some random, sketches without having a plan or an idea in mind. I want to start thinking about what could I bring to this design to make it unique. What would be a cool inspiration, or what would be a cool idea that I can infuse? So I decided to go with dinosaurs. Now, the reason why I chose dinosaurs is just because, one, I just think it's freaking cool, right? I mean, who doesn't love prehistoric animals, right? A kid growing up, I was a huge fan of the Jurassic Park franchise, and I love dinosaurs because, one, they don't exist, and two, they just look badass, right? But when we really look at dinosaurs and we really think about what's really cool about them, I just like that they're just huge predatorial animals, that they are basically a killing machine, right? They have huge jaws, sharp teeth, and there's just something really scary about them. And I just love the forms that we can imagine just from looking at the skeleton. But when we look at dinosaurs, or we look at your source of inspiration, there's a couple of things I want you to keep in mind. The first thing is the silhouette, right? So let me pull this bit of reference here. And we have this as our element. And the reason why I mentioned silhouette is because that's the very thing that our eye is actually going to understand and wrap around the form. So the first thing that I want you guys to think about when you're looking at your inspirational source, whether it's a plant, a weapon, whether it's some sort of architectural thing, whether it's a car or an animal, I want you to look at it as in terms of a silhouette first. So I'm going to make a silhouette. By making this into a silhouette, our eyes immediately know that this is a T-Rex, that this is a fossilized dinosaur, right? And we understand basically what it is. You know, you show this to someone who's not a non-artist, they're most likely going to guess what this is, right? The second most appealing thing about this silhouette is really actually the teeth, right? The teeth have such a strong visual presence because without the teeth, we wouldn't understand that this is a predatorial animal, right? If I took away the teeth and I did something like this, all of a sudden, now we got Barney, right? And who in the world likes Barney? Unless you're a 5-year-old kid, which I'm going to admit, I used to like Barney, I know. Fuzzy pink dinosaur or purple dinosaur. Oh, man. But we look at this, suddenly the silhouette and the overall context, the viciousness, the predatorial animal that we all know and understand goes out the window, right? The teeth are gone. We're like, that's not a dinosaur. That's not a T-Rex, right? That's some weird, vegetable eating creature. But when we bring back the teeth, look how menacing it is. We're like, oh man, that thing is gonna just tear you to shreds, right? The next thing that we're gonna identify, let me write this down here. Silhouette. My spelling is fantastic today. Silhouette, teeth, and last but not least, what would be the third thing that we can identify with? The third thing here is really just the exoskeletal feel. And if we look at all of these shapes, this is what gives us the perception that we're looking at a skeleton. Exoskeletal. Oh my gosh. My spelling. Come on, John. Skeletal. Okay. I gotta go back to English school. This is getting bad. But anyways, so this is the vibe that we're gonna understand is silhouette, teeth, and exoskeletal. Those are the most basic and primitive things that we can identify and understand, right? Because if we didn't have these things as visual cues, it would look not like a skeleton. It would look probably like an actual living, existing creature. So if I cover up the holes, look, all of a sudden we have what looks like an alligator or a real living, T-Rex, right? Suddenly this doesn't look like a dinosaur bone or something that's fossilized. And so these are some of the things that I'd like you guys to just think about. What is your first impression? What are the first 3 key words that come to your mind? So as an exercise, I'd like you guys to try this out, pick out a theme for your character redesign, and then from there, I want you to pull out the 3 keywords, and we're gonna now use them to apply them into our design. Okay? Alright, let's get started on this. So, to begin, I'm gonna go ahead and pull up my reference board, and I'm gonna grab this illustration of the assassin character, since we're doing assassin themes. And I'm just gonna go ahead and actually double up here. And I'm going to drop the opacity, and what I'm going to be demonstrating is how we can apply our T-Rex or skeleton on top of this character into a completely redesigned character here. So I'm going to drop the opacity here. I'm going to make it black and white so I don't get distracted by the colors. But I'm going to drop the opacity so that we can still have a faint, you know, silhouette, or we have a faint visual of what the character is, but not enough to influence our decision making in the overall design here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back the silhouette, or bring back the reference here. And the first thing that I'm going to apply is actually going to be the silhouette. So I'm going to go ahead and make this dinosaur skull a silhouette. Desaturate. I'm going to just kind of darken it down using levels. That way I can control the areas of light and dark here. The reason why I use levels instead is so that I can still retain some of the smaller, sharper details, like these little tiny holes here. And then from here, I'm actually going to go ahead and apply that onto my design, right? And here's the thing, guys. When it comes to redesigning, we can be as very obvious and blunt by saying, well, our design, our form language here is T-Rex, and I'm gonna give this guy literally a T-Rex head, right? Now, this isn't wrong, because all design is subjective when it comes to visual aesthetics. But if we're going about it in a objective manner, and we're thinking about, well, what's the culture, where does he or she come from, and how does it actually work with the character, then we have to be a little bit more mindful of how it's going to be all integrated, right? But if we do this and we just give it, well, it's going to be a dinosaur looking assassin guy, and we're literally just going to give him some dinosaur head, and he or she has a dinosaur mask, and that dinosaur mask is hooded with a mouth, right? It's like chilling right here. This ugly representation, right? And we're done. We're gonna give it dinosaur claws, and we have now what we call a dinosaur inspired assassin. No, I don't want you to do this. This is completely bogus. It's laziness in my mind. You know, it's not being creative with your reference. So the way I'd like you guys to be creative today is not applying it that way, but applying it in a way where maybe the silhouette can influence just the shape, right? So what I like to do is, maybe what we can do is use a silhouette here and influence just the shapes of the design. So maybe the head we keep, but I'm gonna go ahead and start using parts of the dinosaur silhouette to kind of start filling in some of the areas where I think might be really neat to apply. And even on the head here, you know, what if we had something like this? What if I literally use the silhouette of this dinosaur to come up with a really interesting shape orientation on the top for the hoodie, right? So this guy is going to look all angular and sharp looking just because of the amount of stuff that we're giving this character, right? There's a lot of interesting textures and stuff like that. And I can go ahead and fill this in. we have basically the wrist guards and so on. And I can just kind of apply this kind of wherever I need to, right? But I don't want to go overboard where I'm gonna literally have the character, whether you're doing a robot, a female character, a male character, I'm not gonna just go overboard and say, well, dinosaur feet, dinosaur socks, dinosaur knee pads, everything dinosaur related, right? We want to do it enough to the point where we're getting the general point across, right? Otherwise, it's gonna be complete overkill. So what I'd like you guys to think about is, what is the percentile? How much dinosaur versus how much regular clothing aesthetic are we going to utilize? So in this case scenario, let's try something where the character here is actually inspired 80% dinosaur and 20% dino, and then 20% normal. So normal meaning, what if it was, you know, normal clothing, right? So at least we have this rule of thumb of 80% being dinosaur and 20% being normal clothing. So I can probably and strategically go and start designing some of these elements to be more fulfilling to that 80 percentile mark, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and stack these silhouettes here. And literally the silhouettes, they're only going to serve as shapes, nothing more. Because there's no information in the silhouette, right? It's just a shape. So I'm going to go ahead and combine that. Okay. Now that we have that, notice how that covers majority of the body, right? That I would say this is roughly more or less 80% of the actual body here. And now what I'm going to do is, since I have this on a separate layer, I'm going to go ahead and drop the opacity just so I can see. So it's not too overbearing for me to kind of be able to kind of draw on top without getting too distracted. And for this drawing exercise, I'm actually just using a simple flat brush here. And what it was is I just got a hard brush and I just flattened it. So this is a normal brush here. So typically it was just a hard brush with no shape dynamics here. And what I did is I added shape dynamics so I can get a little bit of vignetting and weight distribution, so I can get thin and thick lines. And just to add to it, I'm going to add transfer here, which is going to give me the nice opacity look. And to add to that, I'm going to then squash the shape, so I get this nice kind of transparent, you know, flat marker look. So that's what I'm going to be drawing with. Okay, so I have here my silhouette of the character, and I have my silhouette of the dinosaur bones, and now it's time to start inventing some cool stuff. So let's go ahead and start off with just the general shapes that we see. So what I'm imagining is kind of this concept of this guy, right, our main character here, wearing this really mysterious looking garment, this hoodie. And if you guys if you're like me, I like to just kind of draw in the face. And in this case, I'm literally just copying from our photo reference here. And I can't quite see the face, so I'm going to go ahead and cheat a little bit here. And this exercise, guys, is okay because it's just a design exercise. And you know, if you're working on your own project or if you're working on a client project, then you obviously want to make sure that you do this, you know, from scratch, or it's your own reference. Okay, we got the face here, the general facial feature. Maybe we can make this character a little bit more slightly more angry looking. You know, I mean, this is an assassin, right? So this guy kills. He's like a mercenary, right? With dinosaur clothing on. I know, it sounds pretty awesome. Okay, so as I draw in the features of the face, my brain is trying to wrap around how to make sense of these shapes here and how to combine it with the actual existing materials, right? So obviously these aren't going to be dinosaur bone because I'm mainly focused on just the silhouette. The silhouette is what's going to be my design aesthetic. So I'm copying the silhouette here. But what's cool about this is that immediately I can start to understand, okay, if this is a silhouette, then maybe, you know, this is just, it's still the same cloth, right? It's still the same cloth more or less, but it just has the elements that we're pulling from the silhouette. So it's not going to literally be a clothing made of bones, but it's going to be literally a clothing inspired by the silhouette of bones. I'm going to pull back here just a little bit. And for those of you that want to try this assignment in painting form, you may do so, but I'm mainly just drawing it because I want to focus mainly on the design aspect of it and not get too caught up in the illustration just yet. You know, it's all, for me, it's all in just the design, right? And now, again, the shapes of this, it's all 80% dino inspired, right? So meaning 80% of the shapes that I'm using are dino based, and that's why we kind of plastered, you know, the silhouette over our character quite, you know, excessively. But the clothing, though, is still going to be based off of things that are recognizable, right? It's still cloth. You know, it can be armored type of you know, leather that the character has, but more or less the shapes, though, is what's going to give me an interesting outlook and visual cue on, you know, this different type of aesthetic, right? And already, if you look at what we're developing here, it's actually quite interesting. We have such a unique design. Like, look at those folds. I mean, that's straight up from a dinosaur, right? I mean, it doesn't look like dinosaur. When we look at it, you don't want a design where you're gonna create something and say, oh yeah, dude, that's straight up dinosaur, right? I will show you guys how to be a lot more obvious in some of the other ones, but in this one here, I want to start thinking about how to cleverly create a form language using dinosaurs, but not being so apparent with it. And I like kind of these little flares here. And what's great is that the shapes here are so awesome. These are shapes that I would never have come up with, guys. I mean, it's so weird. I feel like I'm cheating because I'm kind of in amazement of my own, you know, happy accident. I'm like, whoa, I wouldn't have came up with these shapes. These are so unique, you know? It's unique to me because it's something that I wasn't expecting or I wasn't planning, you know? And And this process of creating your own form language has been so useful and so helpful in the creative development of a lot of things. You know, maybe just for kicks, maybe if we want to change the outlook of the character, maybe the character itself has a mask or something, you know, just to make it look more assassin-like. And maybe the character's mask, maybe this is the only thing that actually has bones on it. Or maybe it has bones up here. You know, who knows? And this is a way so that, you know, we can come up with interesting shape languages and form languages, you know, to really kind of have something unique to bring to the table. So if you guys are following along, you know, I'd like you guys to start or think about something a little bit more simple to design, and it can be a simple object. If you guys want to try dinosaurs, I highly encourage it, mainly because, you know, you have this video tutorial to kind of gauge whether or not it's heading in the right direction, but also you know, you can try to see if what you put together, whether you're designing a character or a vehicle, try using the same silhouettes that I'm using here, and see what you come up with, you know? And that's going to be the fun part. Since we're using Photoshop, and Photoshop allows me to kind of make a lot of shortcuts, so I'm going to go ahead and duplicate my drawing here and actually transfer it over onto the other side. It gives me a nice way to kind of speed up the drawing process, right? And then here, and what's great is that, you know, if there's certain things that don't follow, like, you know, I have this harsh edge right here, we don't have to follow it. Just follow what you feel could match. So this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that it would be really neat to have, you know, the garment, and this is by pure accident, just kind of following or contouring the form of the character's leg, right? And I'm even thinking maybe the teeth here is something that wraps around the character. And even these negative spaces, let's utilize that. I mean, this can be something interesting. You know, even though we might not see something right away, but it's worth bringing on as some sort of texture, you know, that can inspire kind of the way that this character actually put together this kind of garment or this clothing. And what's cool is I'm even using some of the transparency from our other drawing to kind of see other design opportunities. If this is going a little quick for you guys, I highly recommend, you know, take a break. You know, try not to feel obligated to watch through the entire thing before doing your own. Feel free to take a break or pause, and try to apply this and take things incrementally. I know this is, for some of you, this might be a repeat, but for those of you who are seeing this and understanding this for the first time, I highly recommend just, you know, taking a break to kind of digest and really understand this information. Okay, because this stuff can be very tricky and it can get really complex really quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and start editing out certain things. Well, actually, we can do that at the end. so I can show you guys the difference between the two. So we have an opportunity here to follow the contour of this, you know, or we can follow down on this shape here. I think I'm going to go ahead and follow the contour just because the actual original image underneath kind of does that, and I don't want to break that flow, but I'm going to try my best to see if I can get this to translate all of these details. And then we're going to get in kind of the flow here, and then not to add in the dinosaur teeth. And then so on. Now we're going to add in just kind of the legs and stuff. So a lot of this stuff here, I'm obviously kind of using what's underneath and present. And now you don't have to do this where, you know, it's kind of like if it's blank here and you want to add more stuff, just do it accordingly to your proportion. I left this area blank in terms of, you know, not affecting the form language, but if I wanted to create my own design of boots or shoes or pants, you know, feel free to do so, but I'm just going to make it so that it doesn't really follow the shape language. It's just going to be just something that's independent. So for me, I'm probably going to use, or probably going to make something that's more a little bit different from this type of clothing aesthetic, which is like this really traditional mid-century kind of boots. And then we got the shoes here. All right, now let's start working our way into the arms. We're getting pretty close here, guys. And it's crazy how, you know, just spending a little over 20-30 minutes, you know, how much of a change and result I'm getting here. And just thinking about all of these details, you know, I'm just going to go off of what's underneath. You know, it's probably going to be leather material, and I'm just following the shape. The shape is what's going to be the real driving factor for this form language. Got the character's hand here. And if you want to add in the weapon, you can go ahead and do that as well. Add in the other side of the same kind of clothing here. And just to kind of accentuate that this is, you know, this leather, I'm just going to go ahead and add just little creases and stuff there. That's going to help explain that. Now for this kind of exercise, guys, what's great is typically I like to do several iterations, and whether it's for yourself or a design client, these are all really great explorations to kind of showcase and to really kind of, you know, show variation of design to your clients. Okay, when I turn this off, we'll start to reveal what we have here. So here, now we see our actual drawing. We can start to make the comparison from the original and see the core differences between what we had originally and what it is that we came up with based on based on our new design here. Obviously there's a couple of things that I'm gonna adjust. You know, the leg here, little crooked looking in my opinion. And already this is looking really interesting. Just the amount of detail and what's presented here is so different from the original design, right? This is already has such an interesting design aesthetic and our own form language that we developed, you know, just from dinosaur bones, right? And so what I'm doing here is I'm just cleaning up some areas that I think don't need too much of this repetitive pattern and shape. And the reason I'm doing that is because some areas are better to have simple, you know, to keep it more simple and breathing, and to give it that breathing room. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and start adding a little bit more line weight since we have this design, and I'm just adding line weights in the areas where I know for a fact that there are overlaps, right? Just gonna add line weights just around the collar here, and anything that I know for a fact has a very, very clear overlap, because I want to show the design isn't just all flat, that there's very, very defined clear areas where one material is overlapping another material, and that's what's going to help sell the layering factor. So whether you guys are doing this digitally or traditionally, it's the same rules that apply with line weight. I typically like to draw a lot lighter, you know. It's different for everyone, but it's, for me, that's kind of the way I feel comfortable drawing lighter, just so that if I mess up, I can hide it better by overlapping or punching out the lines around it. Also, another thing about drawing light is that it forces you to kind of, you know, detail some areas without feeling too overly overdone, right? Because I know that when we add a lot of details, a lot of common mistakes that I see is too much detail, but it's too spelled out and it's too punctual. And that's what makes things look incredibly noisy, right? So we want to be careful about that. So I'm just darkening some areas here, and even the cloth I want to darken, just because it's a very, very clear overlap from the character. And overall, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually copy the character, copy the drawing, right? You guys see how I did that? I actually press Control J, that's a quick command, or you can grab it and just duplicate it, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to erase around. I'm going to erase in the internal bits. So what that does is that it gives me a nice silhouette of the outside, but I keep the light lines on the inside. Okay, so it's a little bit of a cheat to be able to kind of control your line weight, and also to not have to kind of go over everything twice. And so this gives me this result. Okay, so in order for me to see the silhouette more clearly, what I like to do is I like to pick just a regular gray, and just kind of go over the interior of the character. The reason why I do this is so that, one, if I ever need to paint it, I have a silhouette that I can work off of, and two, it just for presentation wise, our eyes, when we're looking at character designs, we like to look at the silhouette. So whether you guys want to do this to your drawings or not, it's up to you, but for me, it's always helped me to kind of wrap my eyes visually around the object, and it just helps the kind of visual read of the character when I have just a little bit of value underneath. And it doesn't have to be too dark. You know, I don't want your image to be overpowered by the value, but just enough so that our eyes can perceive the silhouette, and also just to show the difference between the original character design and the new character design, and the new character design. So here we can make a comparison between how much of a silhouette change we actually made. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish off the top of the head. I should make this selection here. Sorry guys if some of this stuff is very boring and tedious. I know that this isn't the most fun part to watch, where I'm filling in, and if you guys need to fast forward this part, I completely understand. It's like I wish sometimes I could fast forward my own process. I'm like, geez, I don't want to watch myself do this. Drives me nuts, man. Alright, so we have the character here. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna lighten it a little bit. It's a little dark for my taste, but now I can see the character, right? I can see the difference. And if we look at the silhouette here, look how different of a silhouette. You know, it starts to indicate just some subtle areas, right? But visually, when we see the two, they're completely different designs. And that's kind of what I'd like you guys to try out in your design practice here, is try to take something that's existing, whether it's a character, vehicle, prop, environment, and try to put your own visual twist on it and see how far you can take it. Okay? Let's try another pass here. We're gonna do another version here. I'm gonna go ahead and shrink this character and put it up in the top right hand corner so we can always refer back to it. And then next here, I'm going to go ahead and do the opposite. This time, the character is actually going to be 20% dinosaur and 80% regular. Right? So when I'm going to do 20% dinosaur, just to really get the most use out of this reference here, or this form language, I'm going to go ahead and actually use as much of the actual texture itself, right? The eyes, the teeth, and all that stuff. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of alter some of this stuff that I don't want. And that's what's great about, you know, using this dinosaur as your own texture, is that I can start to kind of come up with really creative ways to implement dinosaur-like design languages, you know, whether it's a costume design, whether it's a detail, or whether it's literally just, you know, the character took parts of a dinosaur to kind of, you know, form fit it onto the actual costume. So I'm gonna do this, and this is, you know, I would say getting close to 20%. You know, it's up to you what you want to do, but I generally keep a good ratio. I don't want to have 50% dinosaur bones and 80% being regular clothing, but I want to have I don't want 50-50, because it's going to look very, very static and boring. I want to have a good distribution, a very dynamic distribution of shapes. And I'm just thinking I need something extra here on this side, so I'm going to go ahead and add this bone, just because I think it needs something just slightly, something a little extra there. And you can always test it out, right? You can always pull it apart and think, oh, that might look kind of cool, I don't know. Or you can say, nah, I don't need it, I can throw it away. So it's entirely up to you, and this is what's great about using your reference in this manner. So now I'm going to do this version. I'm going to desaturate. And I'm going to darken, lighten down just a little bit. And then I'm going to start drawing on top of this. Okay? And what's great about this is that, yeah, you know, I have the character underneath. You know, it's kind of brainless in the first couple stages. But if you have your own design, you have your own pre-done, you know, theme in mind, it's safe to say, well, if you want to create variations, you can use the existing design here. To start coming up with variations, right? So I'm obviously using this existing design here to come up with alternative costume designs. And this is all a part of the design process, right? Because when it comes to illustrating, guys, there's a difference between illustrating and designing. The core difference is illustration is about painting and making the image look good. Designing is about the idea. I want to make sure that the ideas are good. Good enough to illustrate, for me at least. That is my goal, right? Character is looking a little cross-eyed, and it's sad because I'm actually tracing an image, which means that I really must suck at drawing characters, or I must suck at tracing. And I'm gonna go with I suck at drawing characters, because if I didn't have this, I probably wouldn't know that I'm doing bad. And it's sad because I'm actually tracing this thing and it still looks not that great. But I'm not going to try to beat myself up too much on that. I know I'm probably not the most proficient character designer. You know, my focus has always been, you know, doing hard surface designs and environments. But you know, characters have always been a challenge for me, just because of the complexity in the anatomy and, you know, all the stuff that I didn't pay attention when I was in school, sadly, and I should have. But anyhow, so we got a majority of the face in, and I'm ready to get onto the design, so I can save myself from embarrassing character tracing here. So once I got this lay-in of the actual hoodie, okay, the next step here is I'm actually going to start drawing in this dinosaur bone. And as I'm drawing in this dinosaur bone, I'm literally copying the forms and the textures and all the elements. Now, the point at which we're going to implement this into our design is, how is this dinosaur skeleton actually sitting on this guy's shoulder, right? Now, could we say, well, it's a strap? Possibly. We can say it's a strap that wraps around the shoulder or the arm. We have a strap, we have a really clear area for a strap here, that we have some real estate or space to say, okay, well, there's a good opportunity to put this thing here. So I can put on some like belt buckle thing, You know, it can be the same design or it can be something more simple, but I'm going to go ahead and just kind of do a simpler one here. Also, you know, I have kind of the shoulder piece, and I'm going to indicate that and draw that in. Just going to copy and trace this element here. And then maybe add just some of these, follow some of these shapes here. And then I'm going to try to justify, well, how the heck is this thing on here, right? How do we get that to really fit? So when we look at clothing, a lot of armor is actually, it's strapped on there or it's sewn on to the clothing. So here I can start to say, well, maybe we can justify this by saying, well, this is also strapped on as well. It's kind of this asymmetrical armor piece that's all mounted at the same point. And then the clothing underneath, I'm going to follow the same straps. And here I'm going to say, well, maybe the straps here kind of follow down. And I'm just using the bone as my inspiration to see what else I can introduce. And I'm just trying to find rhyme and reason to see what I can do to kind of really fuse the two together, right? Okay. Feel free to periodically pull back to see if there's anything that's standing out to you. Okay, and then we're going to continue on with this dinosaur bone here. And we got to start thinking about, okay, well, culturally, this guy probably goes and kills mid-sized looking Tyrannosaurus Rex, right? Because the size of this dinosaur skull isn't obviously accurate to the character. So what we can say is that this guy is a type that goes around and he prides himself of killing these dinosaurs, and he literally wears it like armor. And he's basically saying, look at me, I'm a badass, I will mess your shit up, right? Don't mess with me. Not only do I assassinate people like you, but I kill dinosaurs for a living, buddy. You know, so that's what's making this guy badass, and no one is gonna F with this guy, right? Total complete badass. So that's gonna be my logic here, and our rhyme and reason for why he wears dinosaurs as a form of styling. Okay, so we have a really great opportunity here as well. Maybe the way that this portion is wrapped around is actually this cloth. So I'm using the inspiration, the actual reference of our underlay here, of this Assassin's Creed underlay, to kind of really justify how the cloth here can actually wrap around. So be sure to use reference, guys. Be sure to use reference for your theme. Again, if you guys have your own design already planned out, you know, but that's fine. But, you know, I want you guys to feel that if you're stuck on anything, always have some sort of reference to kind of help aid and visually guide you to the next step. Just going to change the patterns here to kind of give it just a little bit of a different look. Alright, so we got the arms here. We got some extra armor here, and I'm going to add some a little bit more just to kind of switch it up just a tad bit. I'm going to do the same probably on this side. Actually, yeah, this side can use a little bit of that layering, just to be different from a little bit different from the actual reference here. Okay, now I'm gonna do the actual the pattern here. Now look how crazy this looks. This is actually quite a bit of information. We probably won't be able to judge what to keep in versus what to take out, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy a good majority of this and transfer it onto the actual design as much as I can, and then once we turn off the layer, we'll then be able to see what we need to simplify. And when I'm thinking about simplifying, guys, I'm literally thinking about, okay, well, what is too much detail? And too much detail can be, you know, things that's not really helping the readability, right? When you guys have way too much detail, it literally means that you have way too much stuff on there, and it's not helping the legibility of your design, right? And sometimes you need things to be very simple and clear in order for the viewer and the audience to understand what they are looking at. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of this guessing game of, you know, of just high amounts of detail, and it literally can be work against you, and it can work against your design and your overall form building. Okay. We have a cloth here. We can choose to keep all of this if we like. You know, this is all from the reference. And then all of this great stuff here. The vertebrae of, or at least this is the spine of the dinosaur here. Gives us so much nice texture, right? So much great stuff here. And sometimes it's to the point where I just feel like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like stumbling, right? I'm just kind of drawing in these lines that I'm wondering, like, what in the world is all this detail? It just looks like overlapping stuff. But I know I'll have a better idea as soon as I turn off the layer what to make sense of and what to punctuate. But for now, I'm just going to try to follow my instinct. You know, just kind of go for it and see what we come up with. You know, this cloth is obviously covering that portion here. If you guys have issues with line weight too, I know I always do, or just kind of drawing in general, try to just do a couple finesse lines. You know, obviously in Photoshop it's a cheat to kind of use shift click. You can do straight lines, but try to practice just doing really flowy calligraphic lines. This will help you to kind of get into the rhythm of having a little bit more finesse in your drawing. I know it's funny, right? It's like, what the hell, drawing in Photoshop? It's like, why not just draw traditionally? And the thing is, you know, I would prefer drawing traditionally, but you know, sometimes when you're doing a quick sketch in Photoshop to prepare for a painting, you know, you just want to be able to kind of just get that accuracy that you're used to on paper. You know, I come from doing a lot of traditional paper drawing, and you know, the lines and the control I get sometimes it's just not as nearly as good as what I would get drawing traditionally. But to kind of get as close as I can, I'll do a little bit of line practice like this, just to kind of get as close and as accurate as I can. So now we have basically this bit of texture, and I added it in there, and it's a bit ambiguous right now the way I see it, but it can give me some ideas for how we can integrate it into the boots here. And again, this might be a scapula or like a part of the dinosaur bone that the character stitched on as some sort of like protective knee pad or armor. But this might be, you know, this might be worth, you know, the extra protection that this guy needs. You know, especially if he's like running and going around sliding and stuff, and you know, assassinating people. I mean, you can only imagine the amount of knee scraping that this guy's probably gonna end up doing to himself. Okay, don't forget to save. I've literally had instances where I've lost drawings and paintings by not saving, so try to keep a rule of thumb of periodically saving as much as I can. You know, I've always been told from my instructors, it's like, you know, if you lose something, you've already done it once, it'll be faster the second time around. It's true, but you know what? It still sucks ass to lose your work. Sorry to say, man. It still does, and I cry at night. Like, no! Why did that happen? Please. And I try finding some way of recovering it, and oh man, it's so heartbreaking. You know, sometimes I even just want to not even draw anymore. I'm like, all right, I'm done. I hate drawing for today. Let's come back and do this tomorrow. But so always remember to save. Don't be like me and get a crashed, you know, Photoshop error. All right, now for the moment of truth, we're gonna start dropping this stuff down and basically unveiling what we drew. That's what we got. So from here, I can start looking at scenarios like that's looking pretty interesting. It's a little bit over the top in terms of the amount of details, so I can start to simplify some areas just to say, okay, well, it's a lot of bone, and I just need that area of rest. And the way I'm gauging this, guys, is I have areas of complexity here, complex and simple, right? And that's something that I want you guys to just keep in mind. Areas of complexity and simplicity here is what's going to give this nice readability, right? So if you guys have areas that are too complex, it means that you need to have areas with a little bit more breathing room, just so that your eye can just take a break. You know, it's like, man, it's already so much stuff. Just take a break from all this visual madness, you know? Just so that we can kind of gather our thoughts and figure out exactly what the hell we just saw, you know? So definitely helps to kind of take a few moments here to simplify. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just, again, we're going to start overlapping some of these lines here. Just to help accentuate the forms. Let's redo that again. It's a little crummy. But I'm just going to overlap just some of these areas here. And I'm just going over just the areas of very clear overlaps. Okay, and so for the most part, it's kind of in the clothing here. Nah, I don't think we need a shadow there. I was thinking about putting a little cast shadow, but it's going to start getting into kind of the rendering aspect of it. So best to keep it simple, since it's just a sketch, you know, and the sketch, it serves a purpose, and the only purpose is, you know, design information in this line drawing. So I'm going to keep it as simple as I can and straightforward. All right, so you guys kind of get the point of line weight and doing these overlaps. You know, overlaps basically are anything that is clearly overlapping another material or object. You want to emphasize that it's in front by actually making the line weight thicker. and that will help with that readability. Now what I do here next is I like to duplicate my lines here, and I'm do that by duplicating here, and I'm just going to erase away what I don't need. So I don't need a lot of this stuff. And you can see that it just kind of pumps the outer silhouette just enough. Okay, and then from here, let's go ahead and create a layer underneath, and I'm going to take a regular hard brush. I'm going to go ahead and just fill that in. Okay, sampled the other value from the other sketch, and I'm just going to go ahead and fill this in. And you guys can see how much of a difference that it makes by applying a little bit of that form language versus a lot of it, right? So it can change the design drastically. Now, what I did here is I actually used two different methods, and it wasn't just only the distribution of the form language, but it was the choice of materials. So if you want to do 80% form language and you want to make it literally a bone-like material, then you can go ahead and do that. If you want to make it a leather-like material, you may do that as well. But the most important thing that you're going to get from this exercise is how the form language of a dinosaur is going to change the design aesthetic, whether it's through silhouette, whether it's through the shape, or whether it's through the materials. So just be mindful of that, and especially when you're painting something like this up, you know, that's going to be even more clear when you show that something is clearly made up of dinosaur bones versus, you know, it's inspired by a dinosaur-like form. Okay. Alright guys, well that concludes the character session. I hope that makes sense for this part. If you guys have any questions, feel free to email me. I'd like you guys to try this out for one section of the homework, and now we'll go ahead and move on to the other section.